information.
But doctors say he has no serious injuries.
Authorities will interrogate the man upon his recovery.
Was he missed by the vigilante or spared?
Is this the justice we want after centuries of law development and human rights?
Would you save your child from pain? We always view superheroes as the saviors of society. But what if there was a game where the player fights a supernatural vigilante? There are so many games out there that throws you in the underdog position, the vigilante's point of view. Infamous, Watch Dogs, Dishonored. The truth is, the law is the true underdog. They have to fight crime against enemies of unknown power while always remaining within the boundaries of their lawmakers. What if you were given a game where you took on the perspective of a lawman, and your mission was to hunt down a supernatural vigilante with no special abilities of your own? How would you play our game? Justice is not always following the law. Sometimes it takes grit and subterfuge before the world can understand your resolve. Things like laws and morals are only guidelines, not a definite answer. Our game, Seldom, Spectre, allows players to understand this concept and utilize it as they see fit. Judgment is ultimately up to them to decide, but in our game, every decision has a number of options with varying consequences. Seldom, Spectre is a narrative adventure game played using a fixed camera angle. It is set in a dark metropolitan city called Grimmingville. The stillness of the air, the never shutting lights, the definite guaranteed sounds of ambulance and gunshots every night. Grimmingville isn't Kansas. It is as if New York City had combined with Detroit to make a city where the rich ruled, the poor lived day by day, and everyone had their hands in something dirty. The player will be able to see their character moving around in a scene with different objects highlighted to indicate what is interactable and what is not. Our game gives the player the option to walk around the dark, eerie streets of Grimmingville, allowing them to investigate crime scenes and make choices along the way that will define how morally good or bad of a person their character becomes. The game will hinge upon what moral path the player decides to take. Our story begins with our protagonist, Mike, an investigator for the Grimmingville Police Department. He was given a task by the captain of his precinct to secretly investigate a big player that had been making moves in the city. He awoke, gagged and bound, inside the city's power plant. He saw the infamous criminal known as Ghost and his armed goons all around him. On the chair in front of Mike, he noticed his son tied down, sobbing, whimpering about how scared he was to his father. With little explanation, Ghost orders his goons to throw the boy in a big bin of chemical waste. Out of anger and rage, Mike bit off the gag in his mouth and launched himself at Ghost, injuring him. Ghost's plan was to teach this town's precinct a lesson about sending cops to chase after him, but he lost his composure after watching the blood run down his face. He starts to pummel Mike down to an inch of his life, then ordered his goons to throw him in the chemical waste as well. This emotional scene is where the player will be presented with their first series of choices. We wanted to make sure the player has a lot of options available to them from the start. The player will be challenged by difficult decisions and detailed examinations of the environment with optional interactions that will potentially change what the player is allowed to do late game. Even in the power plant scene, the player will be periodically given the choice to keep chewing on the gag in his mouth, so when it comes time to break it, if he breaks it, he will either launch himself at Ghost, his goons, or choose to simply speak with his son. This mechanic gives players the ability to mirror their morality through the game, hopefully allowing them to better understand who they are as a person and what choices they would make or consider in their times of crisis. We want to be sure that the player understands the impact of these hard choices, so if the player makes the choice to attack Ghost, they will have options as to how. One of those options will be biting his ear off, which, if they do, will make identifying who Ghost is much easier late game. Weeks later, Mike woke up on a hospital bed. On the news, he saw a live message about how a mysterious flying man had been going around killing people with extensive criminal records. The doctor rushed in and told him how lucky he was to even wake up from being in a coma for 6 months. He continued to explain how the town's chemical plant had exploded, and although he was found in the middle of the scene, there was not a scratch on him. He also told Mike about the death of his son, which made him relive the pain all over again. After a few weeks of coping and physical rehab, he was released and eager to head back to investigating. He was still angry at Ghost, and his thought was, if he could survive that explosion, and so could Ghost. Mike's release from the hospital marks the first time the player is given full control of what they do in Grimmingville. We wanted to make the player feel like, although they are the main character, they're just another person in a city, another cog in a machine. To do this, we allowed the player to explore and learn as much of the city as they choose to, before moving to the next main story objective. This adds player dynamic, which ensures that every single playthrough will be different, with different interactions, knowledge of the city, and different moral point of views for each player. Mike begins doing research on who, where, and when Ghost first arrived at Grimmingville. He went around bidding all the arms of his underground sources. The only thing he got out of them was how this still, mysterious flying man was going around killing kingpins and criminals all over the underground world. Mike came to the conclusion that the flying man was actually an alias Ghost was using to wipe out the criminal competition around town. He knew he needed to get deeper into the criminal underground, so he called the dirtiest cop in the precinct, Tony. He asked Tony to dig into the underground on his behalf, asking for the whereabouts of Ghost. Tony ended up betraying him in a proposed setup meet with one of his informants, who was to have all the answers to Mike's questions. During the meet, the informant drove away, indicating that Mike and Tony should follow. While driving, Mike saw a hand waving at the informant's car. At first he thought they were signaling for him to get closer, but as he sped up to approach, he noticed that the informant's hand was all burnt. That's when he started to realize that this might be a setup, that the informant might actually be a ghost. In the very next second, the front of the informant's car was flattened by the flying man. Two goons got out of the back seat, dazed. One attacked the flying man while the other went after Mike, yelling how this was all a setup. This is our introduction to a new style of quick-time events that we are calling quick-time combat. When the player's in high-intensity situations like combat with criminals or the flying man, they will have to make impactful decisions with little time to decide what might be the right or wrong choice. For example, when Mike approaches the vehicle and the goon attacks him, the player might be provided with viable options like kick, punch, or block. Kick might be the negative outcome because the opponent will land a punch before you land a kick. Punch might be the neutral outcome because you land a punch but you get punched as well. And block would be the positive outcome because it would negate the punch altogether. All of these decisions that the player has been making, from what actions they take in combat to what conclusions they reach from investigations, will lead into our game's many endings. The most prominent and emotionally filled ending reveals that the flying man is actually Jimmy, Mike's son, manifested as a supernatural being because of the toxic waste. Jimmy pursues the criminals he thought his father would chase. He tries to show his father the truth, that everything led back to his boss, the captain of Mike's precinct. The very same person that assigned Mike this case is the one that delivered Jimmy to Ghost. The captain and Ghost were in cahoots from the start. Mike and his son were just guinea pigs to instill fear in the city and precinct about whom was the new ruler of Grimmingville's underworld. The player is given the ultimate moral and emotional choice. Keep Jimmy with them, a son to love, a hero to the city, or let him move on, saving him from his pain and loneliness. Now think. You are Mike. You witnessed your son's death. You lost 6 months of your life. You watched helplessly as the flying man terrorized your city. And now, you are standing face to face with your son, the flying man. Would you still save your child?